Regulation I has completely shaken up the VGC meta, and guess what? Calyrex-Shadow is back, and maybe better than ever. So we're gonna break down why Calyrex-Shadow has been so good in this format. We'll talk about the terrain and weather wars, and also the latest Milwaukee regionals results that showcase just how interesting this meta has become. So let's dive in. So in Regulation G, Calyrex-Shadow struggled a little bit, right? Bulky non-restricteds like Urshifu, Raging Bolt, Assault Vest, Rillaboom, they all made it really tough to pilot because it did not always have the support or the pressure that it needed to carry a game if it couldn't get one-hit KOs, right? But now, in Regulation I, it's kind of a different story. Calyrex-Shadow has another restricted to lean on, which means it doesn't have to be the solo carry anymore, right? It allows it to fully commit to its role as a glass cannon, outspeeding and nuking threats before they can even move, while relying on its partner to take care of some of the restricteds that it would otherwise struggle with. We're even seeing some support-oriented Calyrex-Shadow sets pop up, right? Calyrex-Shadow is fast, so we can do things like Encore, Disable, or even fast Will-O-Wisps to help its restricted partner control the game. Since damage pressure is shared between the two, Calyrex-Shadow can now flex a little bit in its role, right? It doesn't have to take all the kills. Also, a big meta shift from before where we were seeing a lot of Life Orb Calyrex-Shadow, we're seeing a lot more Focus Sash Calyrex-Shadows now. It's a lot more popular than it was in Reg G, that's for sure. And one of the most dominant cores at the beginning of Reg I, Calyrex-Shadow and Zamazenta. It's really good because Zamazenta covers Calyrex-Shadow's biggest weaknesses. Dark types and normal types that resist or are immune to Astral Barrage, Zamazenta can hit super effectively with Body Press. Plus, Wide Guard from Zamazenta is perfect in Calyrex-Shadow speed ties for the mirror. It will protect your Calyrex-Shadow against that opposing Astral Barrage that would otherwise be 4 times super effective. So this combo at the beginning of Regulation I was everywhere in the top of the ladder and the tournaments. In the first Victory Road tournament, Calyrex-Shadow was on 6 of the top 8 teams. And in the second tournament, Calyrex-Shadow was on only 4 out of the top 8, but it did include the winning team that ran the core with Zamazenta. So this isn't just a lot of hype about how they theoretically might be good together. Calyrex-Shadow and Zamazenta have had results. But Calyrex-Shadow isn't the only story, right? When you're building a team for Reg I, you have to be thinking about how you will control the terrain and the weather, right? Because Miraidon brings the electric terrain, and since everyone's trying to counter Miraidon, Rillaboom will be on a lot of teams bringing the grassy terrain. So if you don't have a way to manage terrain control, less so against Rillaboom, but extremely so against Miraidon, you're probably just gonna get steamrolled. And the same goes for weather, right? Miraidon is currently the most popular sunsetter, even more than Groudon, but Kyogre is also up there in usage. So again, if you don't have a plan for how you'll take on these weather teams, it can be very difficult to gain a foothold in a game against them. So speaking of Miraidon, it pairs super well with Calrex Ice. Cali Ice brings strong ice-type coverage to deal with the ground and grass types that Miraidon would otherwise struggle with, and Miraidon can threaten the water types that wall Calyrex Ice. So it's a super high energy offensive duo, and we're seeing a lot of them in the highest levels of play. So again, you need to think of how you will counter Miraidon without relying fully on ground and grass types, because you will likely be seeing Miraidon and Calyrex Ice at the same time and need to be able to counter them. So we've talked about the beginning of Regulation I, how Calyrex-Shadow and Zamazenta were dominant, how Miraidon and Cali Ice have been doing super well, talked about terrain and weather, but Milwaukee Regionals was last week and it kind of threw the meta on its head a little bit. The results tell a really incredible story here. So Miraidon was on 7 of the top 8 teams. Total domination from Miraidon and a continuation of its high usage from Regulation G. But here's the kicker, right? The winning set, it wasn't the Choice Specs Terra Fairy set that we're used to seeing. It was actually an Assault Vest Terra Electric Miraidon. And It ran Snarl for support to help control threats like Terapagos, Calyrex-Shadow Rider, Lunala, and even opposing Miraidon. So that's some super cool tech, and we're starting to see a lot more variety in how Miraidon is run. Also notable, 3 Calyrex Ice made the top 8, and all of them were paired with Miraidon. So that Miraidon Calyrex Ice duo is still super strong, and now it has proven results in an official regional tournament. But only 1 Calyrex-Shadow made it into the top 8, and it wasn't even paired with Zamazenta. It was paired with Terapagos, which actually, that's a really cool synergistic core as well, right? Because Terapagos is immune to the ghost type moves that are 4 times effective against Calyrex-Shadow, and Calyrex-Shadow is immune to the fighting type moves that Terapagos is weak to. So they may not be super strong on the field at the same time, but they can be a really great defensive core that you can make use of with some good positioning. But my read as for Calyrex-Shadow's performance is that most of the field came extremely prepared for dealing with Calyrex-Shadow Rider plus Zamazenta. That core was extremely strong at the beginning of Regulation I, so all of the top players would have already had a game plan against it. And usually when that happens to a team core where it's super dominant at the beginning of a regulation and then falls off, it will come back later in the regulations timeline when people are less looking out for it, right? Because right after it's dominant or as it's having its domination, everybody's gonna be prepared for it. So usage and performance will fall off a little bit and everybody will kind of forget about it and it can creep back up in usage a little bit. But the Pokemon that really won big at Milwaukee Regionals, in my opinion, was Lunala. There were 3 Lunalas in the top 8, all of them paired with Miraidon. And Justin, Andrew, Carson, and Shi Liang all dominated with the same exact Lunala and Miraidon team. Andrew and Carson finished 1st and 4th, so both of them in the top 8, which means they were definitely doing something right. They made a meta call and it paid off for them big time. So that team was Electric Seed Lunala paired with Miraidon, right? So that Electric Seed boosts Lunala's defense. And then you have not only Shadow Shield to help reduce the damage of that first hit, but you also have access to Screen's Grimmsnarl, Snarl on the Miraidon, and Intimidate Incineroar. So this team was built to be super bulky and defensive, and be sure to get that trick room up. Also, shout out to that one Ho-Oh that made the top 8. I said in a previous video that Ho-Oh could be really well positioned in this Regulation I meta, that it could pop off, and it finally did. So go check out that video if you want to see me speaking into existence Ho-Oh's performance at the Milwaukee Regionals. So where does that leave us, right? Regulation I is incredibly fast, it's high pressure, it's full of creative, unique pairings. Calyrex-Shadow is thriving. It might be down for a minute, but it will be thriving again, mark my words. Miraidon is continuing to control the terrain meta and basically forcing you to consider putting Rillaboom on your team just to deal with it. And team building has become a whole lot more interesting, if you ask me, compared to Regulation G. So if you enjoyed this meta breakdown, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what is your favorite 2 restricteds to put on a team right now? Are you still team Calyrex-Shadow and Zamazenta, or are you cooking up something a little bit spicier? And don't forget, we'll be testing unique and fun teams for the entire duration of Regulation I, as well as occasionally talking about the meta and what we think could happen. So don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can be the first to know when I post a new video. Bye!